Let's get more on the story here and bring in our guest, University of Shizuoka, Professor Seijiro Takeshita joins us right now with his thoughts on where we are here. Seijiro, where do we go? I mean, what's more important to you now? What do you think Shinzo Abe can realistically take home that helps a little bit, I guess, him move the needle on these approval ratings, which frankly are close to rock bottom now?
Well, actually, he needs to bring in some omiyage, which is basically a gift from overseas. And that is exactly as you pointed out. If he could bring out the deal in TPP, then that would be really a boost to his popularity, which, as you pointed out, had been faltering quite rapidly. Because in January this year, we were just saying that, there's no competition for the September LDP election. It's going to be Abe and Abe. But we can clearly see that, he's now falling behind two other of his, former colleagues. So certainly, I'm sure he would like to bring in external positive factors into the whole agenda.
Are there items on the agenda that in this meeting that's taking place right now, of course, between the two, that resonate enough and with the Japanese public that perhaps might be material enough for him to move the needle on these approval ratings? Or are these sort of just the back issues, if you will? Yeah.
Well, if you can get, again, the U.S. back into the seat on talking about TPP, it's a totally different dimension. But as you pointed out earlier, that's unlikely. And moreover, what the Japanese public are quite angry about is how the government has basically coped with a series of scandals after scandals. But the fact of the matter is that it's not really Mr. Abe, but it's Japan's relationship of political issues versus and with the Japanese bureaucrats, which are supposed to be separate, but really aren't. And this is a reason why these scandals are just pouring out. So it's not really Mr. Abe. It could change to other prime minister and we'd be talking about exactly the same thing. But unfortunately, the public really aren't seeing the stem of the problem, which is a structural issue, but, are putting a blame on Mr. Abe, and therefore his rating is going down quite rapidly. Well,
if for the lack of a better phrase, I guess Mr. Abe is the poster boy for what I guess you allude to being a dysfunctional structural political system in Japan. What would you suggest then as a solution to that?
Well, there needs to be a lot more clear division of power of bureaucrats versus the politicians. The fact of the matter is that they're far too close. It worked during the growth era when the Japanese, I would say, bureaucrats were able to advise these Japanese ministers on what to do in their policies, because obviously they're the professionals and not the politicians. That worked out very, very eloquently. But what needs to be done is a separation of power, especially the influence that the politicians can impose to these bureaucrats. That is the utmost importance, rather than talking about these, these final results of these little scandals. So unfortunately, I think the focal point is now being shifted to individual blame rather than the structural issue, which should be solved as soon as possible.